As we have seen, the first fundamental phase of the survey research process is the definition of the research model. When we start designing a survey, the first question we should ask ourselves is, what do we want to discover with our survey? In this lecture, we will see how to answer this question. Defining the research model means, first of all, to clearly define the overall research objectives in terms of main goals that the research aims to reach, or main research questions to answer. Referring to our example of the IPS project, the main goal was to investigate the strategic role of the purchasing function, investigating how the overall company strategy is translated into objectives for the purchasing people, how these objectives influence the adoption of organizational mechanisms, processes and tools, and finally, how they impact performance. Once the research objectives are clearly defined, the following step is the identification of the relevant constructs. By constructs, we mean the key concepts, which are included in the objectives and need to be investigated, often at a high level of abstraction. In the IPS model, examples of constructs are business strategy, purchasing organization, and so on. The key element to design a good survey is to leverage as much as possible on existing literature by adopting constructs that are already defined, consolidated, and tested by previous research. In this way, we make sure to build upon a solid base, and we do not need to invent everything from scratch. In addition to the identification of the main constructs, the research model should include also the relationships among them, which we want to investigate. Again, it is crucial to build upon previous research to make sure we are exploring relationships that are meaningful and relevant, that maybe have already been proposed by previous works, but not yet tested empirically or tested in a different context. This is why a thorough literature review is needed before designing a survey, in particular with a theory testing purpose. Often exploratory research, conducted by means of case studies, formulates propositions, which are about relationships among constructs, and we need to conduct large-scale empirical research to test such propositions and be able to either confirm or discard them. The IPS research framework that we can see in the image summarizes the constructs and the main relationships that are investigated. Business strategy is expected to drive purchasing strategy, organization, and skills. In turn, these are supposed to influence category strategy, processes, and tools, which impact performance. Finally, we expect a relationship with business performance. In order to move from the theoretical model to the empirical one, that is, the operationalization of the theoretical concepts into measurable objects, the first step to take is the clear definition of the unit of analysis. This is always critical in any kind of research, including survey. By unit of analysis, we mean the definition of the entity that will be the subject of the research, from which we are going to collect data. Let's use again the IPS project to better understand this concept. We are interested in investigating the way companies manage their purchasing activities. So, our unit of analysis is going to be the purchasing function of a company. However, companies purchase a broad variety of goods and services, such as raw materials, components, finished products, maintenance, logistics, information technology, and so on. They are very different in terms of value, importance, characteristics, supply market, and therefore, they require very different ways of purchasing. For this reason, the IPS unit of analysis has been further narrowed down to a single purchasing category in order to make sure that all the category-specific answers were consistent. In the end, we had two units of analysis: the entire purchasing function for the part of the survey measuring concepts that apply to the entire function, and a single category for the more specific questions. The operationalization of the research model requires also to translate constructs into variables. By variables, we mean single elements that can be operationalized in practical terms and therefore can be measured. Usually, we use multiple variables to articulate a construct so that we can operationalize and measure such construct by combining together the related variables. Using again an example from the IPS project, the construct of purchasing strategy has been operationalized in terms of priorities to be pursued, such as cost reduction, quality improvement, delivery time reduction, and so on. Again, the existing literature often provides good support for this step, suggesting variables that have already been used and tested to operationalize the relevant constructs, so it is recommended to use them as much as possible. Finally, we need to formulate research hypotheses that are specific relationships between two or more variables which can be statistically tested. They are typically formulated in the form variable A as a positive or negative impact on variable B, so with a clear direction and sign. They need to be very clear and specific, unambiguous, to allow a clear result. That is, they will be either rejected or supported. An example from the IPS project is the following: the importance of purchasing cost reduction has a positive impact on the turnover rate of suppliers. Also, hypotheses need to be clearly rooted in existing research, in particular in the preliminary theory that we want to test empirically. Now that we have completed the definition of our research model, we can move to the next phase of the survey research process, which is the design of the survey instrument.